The rain hammered against my office windows like angry fists, and I should have taken it as a warning. 3 days. 3 glorious days of silence from Nessa, and I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd finally gotten the message. I was hunched over the blueprints for the Morrison Community Center, my coffee growing cold as I traced the structural lines with my pencil. Architecture had always been my escape, the place where everything made sense, where problems had solutions and foundations were solid. Then the elevator dinged. "Sir, you have a visitor," Janet's voice crackled through the intercom, but I could hear the commotion behind her words. Raised voices, heels clicking frantically across our marble lobby. "Tell them I'm—" The office door exploded open. Nessa Halvor, my wife of 6 years, stood in the doorway like a hurricane given human form. Her mascara had streaked down her cheeks in black rivers, her usually perfect blonde hair hung in damp tangles, and her designer coat dripped puddles onto my Persian rug. "You can't just disappear," she screamed, her voice echoing off the exposed brick walls. 91 calls, Finn. 91 messages. What kind of husband ignores his wife for 3 days? I set down my pencil with deliberate calm. Through the glass partition, I could see every employee in the firm. All 12 of them had stopped working. Janet covered her mouth with both hands. My junior architect, Kevin, had his phone out, probably recording. The security guard from downstairs stood behind Nessa, clearly unsure whether to intervene. "The kind of husband who sets boundaries," I said quietly. "The kind who doesn't jump every time his wife snaps her fingers." Nessa's face twisted with rage. She stormed across the room, sweeping my coffee mug off the desk. It shattered against the wall, leaving a brown stain that would probably never come out. "Boundaries?" she shrieked. "We're married. You don't get to have boundaries from your wife." That's when I knew. Not suspected, not wondered, knew. This wasn't about missed calls or hurt feelings. This was about control. About a woman so accustomed to getting her way that 3 days of silence had shattered her carefully constructed world. I stood slowly, my 6-foot frame towering over her petite 5'4". "Actually, Nessa, I do. And if you can't respect that, maybe we need to have a different conversation." Her laugh was bitter, manic. "Different conversation? You mean like the one where you explain why you're being such a controlling piece of garbage?" The office had gone completely silent. Even the rain seemed to pause. I could feel 24 eyes watching us through the glass, could practically hear the gossip already spreading through our small architectural community. "Security," I said calmly, pressing the intercom button. "Please escort Mrs. Halvor out of the building." "You wouldn't dare," she hissed. I looked her straight in the eyes. "Try me." The security guard, a kind man named Pete who'd worked downtown for 15 years, stepped forward apologetically. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Nessa's face went through a series of expressions: shock, rage, humiliation, and finally something that looked almost like fear. She grabbed her purse from where she'd dropped it and stalked toward the door. "This isn't over, Finn," she called back. "Not even close." The elevator doors closed behind her with a soft ding, and the office slowly came back to life. Conversations resumed in hushed whispers. Keyboards started clicking again, but I remained standing at my desk, staring at the coffee stain on my wall, wondering how I'd missed the signs that my marriage had become a war zone. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "You're making everything worse. Stop digging." L. Lumi Varen, Nessa's best friend and self-appointed sister. The woman who'd been by Nessa's side through every major decision in our marriage, whispering advice I was never privy to, the woman who somehow always knew about our fights before they happened. I deleted the message and sat back down at my desk. The Morrison Community Center blueprints stared up at me, but the lines had lost their meaning. Instead, I found myself sketching something else entirely, the floor plan of our house, marking every room where I'd felt like a stranger in my own home. My intercom buzzed again. "Finn?" Janet's voice was gentle, concerned. Should I call someone?" "No," I said. "But do me a favor. Pull up our security footage from the last 10 minutes. I want a copy." "Are you sure? It's pretty ugly." "Yeah, I'm sure. Email it to me." I had a feeling I was going to need evidence of everything from now on. The rain picked up again, drumming against the windows like a countdown timer. In the distance, I could see the gleaming towers of downtown, where Nessa worked at her high-powered law firm, where she made more money than me, had more influence than me, and apparently felt entitled to more respect than she was willing to give. 3 days of silence. That's all it had taken to crack her facade. I wondered what would happen if I stayed quiet for a week. Ray's boxing gym smelled like sweat, leather, and honest work. Everything my life had been missing. I'd been coming here for 2 weeks, ever since the office incident, trying to work out the rage that had been building in my chest like pressure in a boiler. "You're telegraphing your punches," Ray called out from behind the heavy bag. He was a former cop-turned-gym owner, the kind of man who'd seen every type of liar and cheat the city had to offer. "Whatever's eating at you, put it in the bag, not your shoulders." I threw another combination, feeling the impact reverberate through my arms. "My wife's having an affair." Ray didn't even blink. "You got proof?" "Working on it." "Good man. Suspicion's like cancer. It'll eat you alive if you don't cut it out." That's when my phone rang. Angela Martinez, the private investigator I'd hired 3 days ago. Former Seattle PD detective, now freelance, with a reputation for finding things people didn't want found. "We need to talk," she said without preamble. "In person. 1 hour, Pike Place Market, near the fish throwers. Come alone." The line went quiet. I unwrapped my hands and grabbed my jacket. "Going somewhere?" Ray asked. "To get my proof." Pike Place Market was crowded with tourists and locals, the perfect place for a conversation you didn't want overheard. Angela sat at a corner table in the small cafe, a manila folder thick with documents spread before her. She was exactly what Central Casting would order for a tough female detective. Graying hair pulled back, sharp eyes, and the kind of weathered face that had seen too much. "Sit down, Finn. You're not going to like this." I sat. "How bad?" "Bad." She slid a photograph across the table. "Your wife maintains a rental apartment at 1247 Pine Street, Unit 4B. Lease is under her maiden name, Nessa Varon. She's been there for 2 years. The photograph showed a modern building in the artsy district, all glass and steel. Expensive. "How expensive?" $2,800 a month. Fully furnished, utilities included. I talked to the neighbors. They know her as Ms. Varon, single professional woman. They've seen regular male visitors." She slid another photo across. This one showed Nessa entering the building with a tall, dark-haired man in an expensive suit. They were holding hands. "Orion Vanton," Angela continued. 34, tech startup founder, drives a Tesla Model S, lives in Belltown, makes good money, never been married. Your wife's been seeing him for at least 18 months. I stared at the photo, trying to reconcile the woman in the image with the person who'd screamed at me in my office 2 weeks ago. This Nessa looked happy, relaxed, laughing at something Orion had said. When was the last time she'd looked at me like that? "There's more," Angela said. "Financial irregularities. Your joint Bitcoin wallet has been systematically drained over the past year. Small amounts, nothing you'd notice month to month, but it adds up to about 180,000. My stomach dropped. "That's impossible. I check our accounts regularly." "Bitcoin's different, harder to track, easier to hide. I've got a forensic accountant working on the blockchain analysis, but preliminary results show the funds were transferred to an anonymous wallet, then converted to cash. The transactions originated from IP addresses matching your wife's law firm and the Pine Street apartment." I leaned back in my chair, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. "She's been planning this." "Gets worse. I found this in her gym locker." Angela produced an encrypted flash drive. "Took my IT guy 2 days to crack it. Want to see what's on it?" She opened her laptop and plugged in the drive. Folders appeared on the screen with names like O&N Vegas Trip, Future Plans, and Finn Insurance Docs. "Insurance docs?" Angela clicked on the folder. It contained scanned copies of my life insurance policy, my father's will, and documents related to his estate. There were also notes in Nessa's handwriting. "F's dad terminal. 6 months max. Inheritance estimate 2.3 milliliters. Need to maintain marriage until probate complete." The words hit me like a physical blow. My father was battling cancer, something Nessa knew I was struggling with, and she was treating his condition like a business opportunity. "Your father changed his will 8 months ago," Angela continued. "Removed your wife as secondary beneficiary. His lawyer says she called multiple times asking about the estate, claiming you had medical issues that might affect your judgment." I closed my eyes, trying to process the scope of the betrayal. It wasn't just an affair. It was a systematic dismantling of our life together, a careful extraction of everything valuable before she disappeared. "There's one more thing," Angela said quietly. "The apartment lease ends next month. She's not renewing. There's a folder on the drive labeled Exit Strategy with information about condos in Vancouver. Looks like she's planning to move back to Canada." "She can't just leave. We're married." "Actually, she can. Her citizenship application is still pending. She's here on a marriage-based green card. But if she leaves voluntarily before the divorce is finalized, she avoids any potential immigration complications." I stared at the laptop screen. at the digital evidence of my wife's deception. 2 years of planning, 2 years of lies, theft, and manipulation while I worked late nights to build our future. "What do you need from me?" I asked. Angela smiled grimly. "That depends. Do you want to catch her, or do you want to stop her?" "What's the difference?" "Catching her means evidence for the divorce, maybe criminal charges for the theft. Stopping her means making sure she doesn't get away with it." I thought about Nessa's face in my office, the entitled rage when I dared to ignore her calls, the way she'd called me controlling while systematically robbing me blind, the cold calculation in those notes about my father's estate. "I want to stop her." Angela closed the laptop and gathered the photos. "Then we're going to need a better plan. And Finn, from now on, you don't confront her about any of this. You don't change your behavior, don't give her any reason to suspect you know. Can you do that?" I nodded, but inside I was already planning. Nessa had set the rules of this game 2 years ago, when she decided our marriage was just a business transaction. She taught me that love was weakness, that trust was stupidity, that the only thing that mattered was who had the better strategy. Fine. Let's see how good a strategist she really was. "One more thing," I said as Angela packed up her files. "Her friend Lumi Varen. I want to know everything about her too." "You think she's involved?" I think Nessa doesn't make a move without consulting her sister. And if Lumi's been helping with this, I want to know how deep it goes." Angela nodded approvingly. "Now you're thinking like a detective. I'll have a full report on Ms. Varen by tomorrow." I walked back through Pike Place Market, past the fish throwers and flower vendors, past couples holding hands and families laughing together, normal people living normal lives, trusting that the people they loved wouldn't systematically destroy them. I envied them their innocence. My phone buzzed with a text from Nessa. "Working late tonight. Don't wait up." I almost laughed. Working late, right. Probably at the Pine Street apartment with Orion, planning their new life in Vancouver while spending my father's inheritance money. I texted back, "No problem, love you." The lie came easily now. After all, I'd learned from the best. The marriage counseling office smelled like vanilla candles and false hope. Dr. Patricia Webb had been our therapist for 6 months, ever since Nessa suggested we needed professional help to work through our communication issues. Now, sitting in the familiar beige chairs, I understood why she'd been so eager to start therapy. It wasn't about fixing our marriage, it was about building her case. "Finn seems disconnected lately," Nessa was saying, her voice dripping with concern. "He's become very controlling about our finances, questioning every purchase I make, and he's been working such long hours, I barely see him anymore." Dr. Webb nodded sympathetically and made notes. "How does that make you feel, Nessa?" "Isolated, like I'm walking on eggshells in my own home. Sometimes I wonder if he's trying to push me away deliberately." I watched this performance with fascination. Every word was carefully chosen, every gesture calculated to paint me as the problem, the controlling husband, the distant partner, the man who was destroying their marriage through his own selfishness. "Finn," Dr. Webb turned to me, "how do you respond to what Nessa's sharing?" "I think," I said carefully, "that we have very different perspectives on what's happening in our relationship. Can you elaborate?" I could have elaborated extensively. I could have mentioned the Pine Street apartment, the stolen Bitcoin, the exit strategy folder on her encrypted drive. Instead, I leaned forward slightly, maintaining eye contact with Dr. Webb. "I've been feeling like Nessa and I want different things from our marriage. She seems to value independence over partnership, freedom over commitment. I'm trying to respect that while still protecting what we've built together." Nessa's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Protecting what we've built, or controlling it?" "What's the difference?" I asked mildly. Dr. Webb intervened before Nessa could respond. "Let's explore this idea of protection versus control. Finn, can you give me a specific example?" "Our financial planning," I said. "I've been trying to make sure we're prepared for the future. My father's situation, potential changes in our careers, unexpected expenses. But every time I suggest we review our accounts together, Nessa gets defensive." "Because you don't trust me," Nessa snapped. "You treat me like I'm some kind of criminal who's going to steal from you." The irony was so thick I almost choked on it. "I don't think you're a criminal, Nessa. I just think we should be transparent with each other about money." "Transparency goes both ways," she shot back. "You've been secretive about your father's estate planning. You won't tell me what's in his will, what we can expect to inherit. How is that transparent?" There it was. The real reason for therapy, for the Concerned Wife Act, for 6 months of fake vulnerability. She wanted information about my father's will, and she was using our counseling sessions to justify her right to it. My father's estate is his business, I said. When he's ready to discuss it with both of us, he will. But I'm your wife, Nessa pressed. Shouldn't I know about major financial decisions that affect our future? Dr. Webb was scribbling notes furiously. I wondered what she was writing, whether she could see through Nessa's performance or if she was buying the whole show. You're absolutely right, I said, surprising both women. You should know about major financial decisions. In fact, I think we should schedule a meeting with our financial advisor next week, review everything together, checking accounts, savings, investments, retirement funds, complete transparency. Nessa's face went pale. That's not necessary. I trust you to handle. But you just said transparency goes both ways, I interrupted gently. I think it's a great idea. We can review all our accounts, make sure we're on the same page about our financial goals. Of course, if that's what you want. The session continued for another 30 minutes, but the dynamic had shifted. Nessa was quieter, less aggressive, clearly rattled by my suggestion of financial transparency. Dr. Webb seemed to sense the change, but couldn't identify its source. As we walked to our cars afterward, Nessa was unusually subdued. Are you really planning to call the financial advisor? She asked. Why wouldn't I? It was your idea. It wasn't my idea. I just said, that transparency goes both ways. I agree. We should be completely honest with each other about everything. She stopped walking and turned to face me. For a moment, her mask slipped, and I saw something that looked almost like panic in her eyes. Finn, there are things about my past, about my family situation in Canada that I haven't told you. Financial complications that might be hard to explain. What kind of complications? Legal issues. Nothing serious, just bureaucratic problems that could affect my immigration status if they came to light. I nodded sympathetically. We'll figure it out together. That's what married couples do, right? Support each other through difficult situations? Right, she said weakly. Support each other. That evening, I sat in my home office reviewing the financial documents Angela had compiled. The blockchain analysis was complete, showing a clear trail from our joint Bitcoin wallet to Nessa's secret account. The forensic accountant had also found evidence of smaller thefts, money skimmed from our joint checking account, charges on my credit cards for purchases I'd never seen. My phone rang. Angela. I've got the report on Lumi Varon, she said. You're going to want to see this in person. Can you meet me tomorrow morning? How bad? Let's just say your wife didn't come up with this plan on her own. After I hung up, I walked through our house, the 1920s craftsman I'd lovingly restored over 5 years. Every room held memories of our life together, but now they felt contaminated by the knowledge of what had been happening in the shadows. In our bedroom, Nessa was already asleep, or pretending to be. Her breathing was too controlled, too measured. She was awake, probably wondering how much I knew, how much damage her therapy performance had done to her carefully constructed narrative. I stood in the doorway for a long moment, looking at the woman I'd promised to love and cherish. The woman who'd been systematically destroying our life together while I worked late nights to build our future. Tomorrow, I would learn the full extent of her betrayal. Tonight, I would plan my response. Nessa had taught me that marriage was a game with hidden rules, secret strategies, and no mercy for the naive. She'd shown me that love was weakness, that trust was stupidity, that the only thing that mattered was who had the better plan. Fine. I was a quick learner, and I was tired of playing defense. The coffee shop on Capitol Hill was the kind of place where conspiracy theories were born, dimly lit, filled with mismatched furniture, and the kind of customers who valued privacy over comfort. Angela had chosen a corner table where we could talk without being overheard, her laptop already open and waiting. Lumi Varon isn't just your wife's best friend, she said without preamble. She's the architect of this whole operation. She turned the laptop toward me, showing a timeline she'd constructed. Photos, documents, and financial records were arranged in chronological order, telling a story that made my stomach turn. It started 3 years ago, Angela continued. Lumi was working as a social media coordinator for your firm. You fired her for falsifying expense reports. Remember that? I did remember. Lumi had been billing personal expenses to client accounts, thinking no one would notice. When I caught her, she'd been defiant, entitled, claiming the amounts were too small to matter. I'd terminated her immediately. She took it personally, Angela said. Really personally. Started a blog about toxic workplace culture that was clearly about your firm, though she never named you directly. The blog didn't get much traction, but it connected her with other women who felt wronged by their employers. She clicked to the next screen, showing social media posts and private messages between Lumi and Nessa. 6 months after you fired her, Lumi reached out to your wife, claimed she was concerned about Nessa's situation, suggested that you were exhibiting controlling behavior that Nessa might not recognize as problematic. The messages were chilling in their manipulation. Lumi had systematically poisoned Nessa against me, reframing every normal marital interaction as evidence of psychological manipulation. Look at this one. Angela pointed to a message from 18 months ago. He's isolating you from your support system, making you dependent on him financially so you can't leave. Classic abuser pattern. But I never... Of course you didn't. But Lumi's smart. She took normal relationship dynamics and recontextualized them. You working long hours became emotional abandonment. You handling the finances became financial control. You being close to your father became prioritizing his family over yours. Angela scrolled through months of messages, showing how Lumi had gradually convinced Nessa that she was trapped in an unhappy marriage with a manipulative husband. The progression was masterful, subtle at first, then increasingly urgent. The affair was Lumi's idea, Angela continued. She introduced Nessa to Orion at a tech industry mixer, told Nessa she deserved to feel desired and that exploring her options wasn't betrayal, it was self-care. And the financial theft? Also Lumi's suggestion. She convinced Nessa that you were hiding assets, that she needed to protect herself by securing independent resources. The Bitcoin transfers, the secret apartment, even the immigration strategy, all Lumi's ideas. I stared at the screen, watching my marriage disintegrate in real time through a series of text messages and social media posts. Lumi had turned my wife against me as revenge for a justified termination, destroying our life together to satisfy her wounded ego. There's more, Angela said grimly. Lumi's been documenting everything. She's got recordings of your therapy sessions, Nessa's been wearing a wire, photos of your house, copies of your personal documents, even recordings of your private conversations. That's illegal. Probably, but it's also effective. She's been building a case to support whatever narrative Nessa needs for the divorce proceedings. Angela clicked to another folder, showing financial records for Lumi's social media consulting business. Business has been good lately. 3 new clients in the past 6 months, all paying premium rates for reputation management services. Turns out, helping women extract themselves from toxic relationships is a profitable niche. The scope of the betrayal was staggering. This wasn't just about an affair or financial theft. It was about 2 women who had systematically dismantled my life as a business venture. What about Orion? I asked. How much does he know? He's a useful fool, Angela said. Lumi convinced him that he's rescuing Nessa from an abusive marriage. He genuinely believes he's the hero in this story. She's been feeding him carefully edited information to maintain that illusion. So he doesn't know about the financial theft? Oh, he knows about that. But Lumi told him you were hiding assets from Nessa, that she was just taking what was rightfully hers. He helped her set up the Bitcoin transfers, thinking he was helping her escape financial abuse. I leaned back in my chair, overwhelmed by the complexity of the deception. Every person in this story believed they were justified in their actions. Nessa thought she was escaping an unhappy marriage. Orion thought he was rescuing a damsel in distress. Lumi thought she was helping women fight back against male oppression. And I had been cast as the villain in all their stories. What's their endgame? I asked. Angela pulled up one final document, a detailed timeline Lumi had created for Nessa's liberation process. Phase 1 was establishing the affair and securing independent resources. Phase 2 was building a legal case for the divorce, documenting your alleged controlling behavior, gathering evidence of emotional abuse, creating a narrative that would justify her actions and maximize her settlement. And Phase 3? Complete extraction, divorce filing, immigration to Canada, new life with Orion in Vancouver. They've already found a condo, already researched the visa requirements for bringing a boyfriend across the border. I studied the timeline, noting the careful attention to detail, the backup plans and contingencies. This wasn't the work of an angry woman acting on impulse. This was a professional-grade destruction of my life, executed with military precision. When? I asked. Soon. Lumi's timeline shows divorce papers being filed within the next 2 weeks. They're waiting for one final piece, confirmation that your father's will has been executed and that you've received your inheritance. The cruelty of it hit me like a physical blow. They weren't just stealing from me, they were waiting for my father's passing to maximize their take. Angela, I said quietly, I need you to do something for me. What? I need you to help me destroy them. She studied my face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. What did you have in mind? They want to play games with my life? They want to cast me as the villain in their little drama? Fine, let's give them a villain they'll never forget. I pulled out my phone and opened the calendar app. Nessa's parents are hosting their anniversary party next weekend. Both families will be there, plus all their friends from the law firm and Lumi's social media crowd. You're thinking of making it public? I'm thinking of making it memorable. Angela grinned, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her. Now you're talking my language. What do you need? Everything. Every document, every recording, every piece of evidence you've collected, and I want it all compiled into a presentation that tells the real story of my marriage. A presentation? They want to paint me as the controlling husband, the emotionally abusive partner? Let's see how that narrative holds up when everyone sees the evidence of what they've really been doing. I stood up, feeling more focused than I had in months. Nessa and Lumi had spent 2 years planning my destruction. Now it was my turn to plan theirs.
One more thing, I said, as Angela packed up her laptop. I want to know everything about Orion's business. Financial records, investor information, employee contracts, everything. You're going after him too? He helped them steal from me. He's planning to help Nessa flee the country with my money.
Yeah, I'm going after him too. Angela nodded approvingly. I like this version of you better. The nice guy routine wasn't working. As I walked back to my car, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Anticipation. For 2 years, I'd been playing defense, reacting to problems I didn't understand, trying to save a marriage that had already been destroyed. Now I was going to play offense, and I was going to win. The Fairmont Olympic Hotel's grand ballroom had been transformed into an elegant celebration of 30 years of marriage. White roses and gold accents everywhere, a string quartet playing softly in the corner, and 100 guests dressed in their finest attire. Nessa's parents had spared no expense for their anniversary party, creating the perfect backdrop for what they thought would be a joyful family gathering. They had no idea they were about to witness the demolition of their daughter's carefully constructed lies. I stood near the bar, nursing a whiskey and watching Nessa work the room. She was radiant tonight, wearing a midnight blue dress that hugged her curves perfectly, her blonde hair swept up in an elegant chignon. She moved from group to group with practiced grace, playing the role of the devoted daughter and loving wife. Beside her, Lumi held court with a cluster of young professionals, regaling them with stories about her latest social media campaigns. She'd dressed for the occasion in a striking red dress that demanded attention, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders like a waterfall. The woman who had orchestrated the destruction of my marriage was enjoying herself immensely. Orion stood awkwardly near the dessert table, clearly uncomfortable in this formal setting. He kept checking his phone and glancing toward the exits, probably wishing he was back in his familiar world of startup meetings and casual Fridays. He had no idea that his relationship with Nessa was about to become very public knowledge. Ladies and gentlemen, Nessa's father, Robert, tapped his champagne glass with a fork. If I could have your attention for just a moment. The room quieted, conversations trailing off as guests turned toward the small stage where Robert and his wife Margaret stood beaming at their assembled friends and family. Margaret and I want to thank you all for being here tonight, Robert continued. 30 years ago, we promised to love and cherish each other through good times and bad, and with your support, we've managed to keep that promise. Polite applause rippled through the crowd. I checked my watch. 8:47 p.m. Perfect timing. Now, we'd like to share a special video tribute that our daughter Nessa put together, highlighting some of our favorite memories from the past 3 decades. Nessa looked surprised, glancing toward the AV booth where a technician was setting up the projection equipment. She hadn't put together any video tribute, but before she could say anything, the lights dimmed and the screen flickered to life. What appeared wasn't a collection of family photos and anniversary memories. Instead, the screen showed a document. A rental lease agreement for 1247 Pine Street, Unit 4B, signed by Nessa Varon. A murmur went through the crowd. People leaned forward, squinting at the screen, trying to understand what they were seeing. I'm sorry, Nessa called out, her voice tight with panic. There seems to be some kind of mistake with the video equipment. But the presentation continued. The lease agreement faded out, replaced by bank records showing Bitcoin transfers from our joint account to an anonymous wallet. Then came the blockchain analysis, tracing the stolen funds to their final destination. Turn it off, Nessa hissed to the AV technician, but he shrugged helplessly. The equipment was being controlled remotely. Angela's handiwork. The financial documents gave way to photographs. Nessa and Orion entering the Pine Street apartment building. Nessa and Orion at a restaurant, holding hands across a candlelit table. Nessa and Orion embracing in the parking garage of his condo building. The room had gone completely silent. 100 guests stared at the screen in shock, then turned to look at Nessa, who stood frozen in the middle of the dance floor like a deer caught in headlights. But the presentation wasn't finished. Next came the text messages between Nessa and Lumi, carefully selected to show the calculated nature of their deception. And messages about extracting maximum value from the divorce. Messages about maintaining the marriage until the inheritance comes through. Messages about building a case for emotional abuse. "This is fake," Nessa shouted, her voice cracking. "Someone's trying to sabotage our family. This is all fabricated." The screen changed again, showing audio waveforms. Suddenly, Nessa's own voice filled the ballroom through the sound system. "I don't care if it hurts him. He fired Lumi for no reason, and he's been controlling our finances for years. If I have to pretend to love him until his father passes and we get the inheritance, then that's what I'll do. He deserves whatever he gets." The recording was from 3 months ago, captured by the surveillance equipment Angela had installed in our house after discovering Nessa's wire-wearing activities. Turnabout, as they say, is fair play. Margaret, Nessa's mother, had gone pale as paper. Robert looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. Around the room, guests were pulling out their phones, some recording the chaos, others frantically texting friends who weren't there to witness the spectacle firsthand. "Nessa," Margaret whispered, "what is this?" But Nessa was beyond explanation. She was scanning the room desperately, looking for an escape route, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her in real time. That's when I stepped forward. "Good evening, everyone," I said, my voice carrying easily across the silent ballroom. I apologize for interrupting Robert and Margaret's celebration, but I thought it was important for everyone to understand the truth about my marriage. All eyes turned to me. I stood calmly in my black tuxedo, hands clasped behind my back, looking for all the world like a man delivering a business presentation rather than destroying his wife's reputation. "For the past 2 years," I continued, "my wife has been systematically stealing from our joint accounts, maintaining a secret apartment, and conducting an affair with Mr. Orion Vanton, who I believe is standing near the dessert table, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else in the world." Orion tried to back toward the exit, but found his path blocked by curious guests who were now staring at him with undisguised fascination. "This wasn't just an affair," I said. "It was a carefully planned extraction operation designed to maximize the financial damage to me while positioning Nessa as the victim of an abusive marriage. The mastermind behind this operation is Ms. Lumi Varen, Nessa's best friend and business partner in what I can only describe as a professional husband destruction service." Lumi had gone rigid, her face a mask of fury and panic. She was calculating escape routes, probably already planning how to spin this disaster in her favor. "The evidence you've just seen represents only a fraction of what we've uncovered," I continued. "Bank records, communication logs, surveillance footage, audio recordings, all of it painting a picture of 2 women who turned the destruction of my marriage into a profitable enterprise." "You're insane," Nessa finally found her voice. "You're having some kind of breakdown. None of this is..." "Real," I interrupted. "Would you like me to call your landlord at Pine Street? Or perhaps we could contact the forensic accountant who traced the Bitcoin transfers? I'm sure Orion would be happy to explain his role in helping you steal my father's inheritance money." The mention of the inheritance hit like a bomb. Robert and Margaret exchanged horrified glances. They knew about my father's condition, knew how painful it was for me to watch him decline. "You waited," Margaret said quietly, the pieces falling into place. "You waited for his father to pass away," I finished. "Yes, the plan was to maintain the marriage until the inheritance was secured, then file for divorce and flee to Canada with Orion. A clean extraction with maximum profit." Nessa was crying now, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of rage and humiliation, the fury of someone whose perfect plan had been exposed and destroyed. "I loved you," she screamed. "I gave you the best years of my life, and you were never good enough. You were boring and controlling and stupid enough to trust you," I said calmly. "Yes, I was all of those things, but I was also naive enough to believe that marriage meant something more than a business transaction." The room was completely silent, except for the sound of Nessa's sobbing and the quiet clicking of phone cameras recording every moment of her breakdown. "The marriage is over," I announced to the room. "Divorce papers will be filed Monday morning. Ms. Varen will be returning to Canada, though probably not under the circumstances she originally planned. Mr. Vanton will be dealing with some business complications related to his involvement in the financial theft." I turned to Robert and Margaret, who stood holding each other like survivors of a natural disaster. "I'm sorry your anniversary party became the venue for this revelation," I said sincerely. "You deserved better. You both deserve to know the truth about what your daughter has become." With that, I walked toward the exit, leaving behind the wreckage of Nessa's carefully constructed lies. Behind me, I could hear the explosion of conversation as 100 guests tried to process what they'd just witnessed. As I reached the door, I heard Lumi's voice, shrill with desperation. "He's lying. He's been abusing her for years. This is all fabricated revenge because she tried to leave him. But it was too late. The evidence had been presented, the truth had been revealed, and no amount of spin could put this particular genie back in its bottle. I stepped out into the cool Seattle evening, breathing deeply for the first time in months. Behind me, the Fairmont Olympic Hotel contained the smoking ruins of my marriage and the shattered reputations of two women who had underestimated their target. Phase 1 was complete. Now it was time for Phase 2. The Seattle tech community was smaller than most people realized. News traveled fast through the network of startups, venture capital firms, and angel investors who kept the innovation economy humming. By Monday morning, everyone in Orion's professional circle had heard about the anniversary party disaster. I sat in my office, reviewing the morning's work while fielding calls from reporters, lawyers, and curious colleagues. The story had leaked beyond the immediate family circle. Someone at the party had posted video clips to social media, and they'd gone viral in the local business community. My phone buzzed with a text from Angela. Orion's investors called an emergency meeting. Thought you'd want to know. Perfect timing. I'd been waiting for this particular domino to fall. Orion's startup, Vantage Solutions, specialized in financial technology, specifically blockchain-based payment systems for international transactions. The irony that he'd used his expertise to help steal my Bitcoin wasn't lost on me. More importantly, his investors were exactly the kind of conservative, risk-averse venture capitalists who valued reputation above innovation. I'd spent the weekend making sure they had all the information they needed to make an informed decision about their portfolio company's leadership. The forensic accountant's report had been particularly damaging. It showed not only Orion's role in the theft from my accounts, but also some creative bookkeeping at Vantage that suggested a pattern of financial impropriety. Nothing criminal, but enough to make investors nervous about their due diligence process. My office door opened without a knock, a privilege I only allowed one person. "You look pleased with yourself," Ray said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "Should I be worried?" "Depends. How do you feel about justice?" "I'm in favor of it, generally speaking." "What kind of justice are we talking about?" I turned my laptop around to show him the morning's news coverage. The Seattle Business Journal had picked up the story, framing it as a cautionary tale about startup culture and personal ethics. The headline read, "Tech Executives' Role in Marriage Fraud Raises Questions About Industry Oversight." "Orion Vanton's about to learn that actions have consequences," I said. "His investors are meeting this morning to discuss his future with the company. Based on the information they've received, I'd say his future is looking rather bleak." Ray whistled softly. "You don't mess around, do you?" I learned from the best. Nessa and Lumi taught me that modern warfare is fought with information and reputation. They just didn't expect me to be such a quick study. My phone rang. Angela again. "It's done," she said without preamble. "Orion's been removed as CEO. The investors are conducting a full audit of the company's finances and considering whether to involve law enforcement." "What about his personal situation?" "Nessa's been staying at his condo since the party. Neighbors report screaming matches every night. Apparently she's not handling the stress well." I wasn't surprised. Nessa had built her identity around being the smart one, the one in control, the one who always had a plan. Having that identity destroyed in front of 100 witnesses would be devastating for someone with her particular psychology. "There's more," Angela continued. "Lumi's business is collapsing. 3 of her clients terminated their contracts after the party footage went viral. Turns out companies don't want to be associated with someone who orchestrates marriage fraud as a side business." "And immigration?" "Nessa's green card application has been flagged for review. The marriage fraud allegations triggered an automatic investigation. Even if she wanted to stay in the country, it's going to be very difficult now." I leaned back in my chair, feeling a satisfaction I hadn't experienced in years. For 2 years, I'd been playing defense, reacting to problems I didn't understand. Now I was playing offense, and the results were everything I'd hoped for. "There's one more thing," Angela said. "Nessa's been trying to contact you. 37 calls since yesterday, plus emails and text messages. She wants to meet." "I'm sure she does." "Are you going to respond?" I considered the question. Part of me was curious to hear what she had to say, to see how she would try to spin the disaster of the past few days. But a larger part of me recognized that any contact with her now would be a mistake. "No," I said finally. "She set the rules of this game when she decided our marriage was a business transaction. I'm just playing by those rules now." After I hung up, I walked to my office window and looked out at the Seattle skyline. Somewhere out there, 3 people were dealing with the consequences of their actions. Orion was probably updating his resume and calling lawyers. Lumi was probably crafting social media posts about being the victim of a vindictive ex-employer. and Nessa was probably realizing that her carefully planned extraction had turned into a complete disaster. I felt no sympathy for any of them. My intercom buzzed. "Finn, your father's attorney is online too." I picked up the phone, expecting routine estate business. Instead, I got news that changed everything. "Finn, I'm calling about the will modification your father requested last week," the attorney said. "He's asked me to add a provision that might interest you." "What kind of provision?" "A clause specifically disinheriting anyone who has attempted to defraud the estate or manipulate the beneficiaries. He's also requested that I document the recent developments with your wife as evidence supporting this provision." I almost laughed. Even from his hospital bed, my father was still teaching me lessons about strategy and planning. "He wants to make sure she can't contest the will," I said. "Exactly. This way, if she tries to claim any portion of the estate, we have documented evidence of her fraudulent intent. It's quite clever, actually." My father had always been 10 steps ahead of everyone else. Even now, facing his own mortality, he was still protecting his family from predators. "Tell him I said thank you," I said. "I will. And Finn, he's proud of how you've handled this situation. He wanted me to tell you that." After I hung up, I sat quietly for a moment, thinking about the past few months. I'd gone from being the naive husband who trusted his wife completely to being the strategic opponent who had systematically destroyed her plans for revenge and profit. The transformation hadn't been pleasant, but it had been necessary. My phone buzzed with another text from Nessa. "Please, Finn, we need to talk. I can explain everything." I deleted the message without reading it completely. There was nothing left to explain, nothing left to discuss. She had made her choices, and now she was living with the consequences. I had work to do. The Morrison Community Center project was moving into its final phase, and I had a reputation to rebuild after months of distraction and personal drama. But first, I had one more call to make. "Ray, it's Finn. Want to grab dinner tonight? I think it's time to celebrate." "Celebrate what?" "The fact that sometimes the good guys win." "I thought you said you were the villain in this story." I looked out at the Seattle skyline again, at the city where I'd built my career and lost my marriage and learned the difference between justice and revenge. "Maybe," I said. "But if I'm a villain, at least I'm an effective one." The rain had stopped, and for the first time in months, the sun was breaking through the clouds. 6 months later, I stood in the completed Morrison Community Center, watching children play in the gymnasium I'd designed. The building was everything I'd envisioned, functional, beautiful, and built to last. Unlike my marriage, it had a solid foundation. The divorce had been finalized 3 weeks ago. Nessa had returned to Canada after her green card application was denied, taking nothing but her personal belongings and a mountain of legal debt. Orion had moved to Portland, where he was reportedly working as a junior developer for someone else's startup. Lumi had pivoted her business model, now focusing on authentic personal branding instead of marriage destruction services. I'd kept the house, the savings, and my father's inheritance when he passed 2 months ago. More importantly, I'd kept my self-respect and learned some valuable lessons about trust, verification, and the importance of reading the fine print in any relationship. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I know what you did was wrong, but I understand why you did it. I hope you find happiness someday. N." I read the message twice, then deleted it. Nessa was still trying to control the narrative, still trying to position herself as the victim and me as the villain. Some people never learned, but I had learned. I'd learned that love without trust is just elaborate pretense. I'd learned that marriage without honesty is just legal prostitution, and I'd learned that sometimes the only way to win a rigged game is to change the rules. The Morrison Community Center would serve families for generations. Children would learn to play basketball in the gym I'd designed. Seniors would attend programs in the multi-purpose rooms I'd planned. The building would outlast all the drama and betrayal and revenge that had surrounded its creation. That was the difference between architecture and relationships. Buildings were designed to endure. People, apparently, were designed to disappoint. I walked out of the community center and into the Seattle afternoon, feeling lighter than I had in years. Somewhere in the city, 3 people were still dealing with the consequences of their choices. But that was no longer my concern. I had blueprints to draw and buildings to design and a life to rebuild.